Often, the latest and greatest technologies in mountain biking are synonymous with lightweight and most expensive. At some point, that technology trickles down the line and the world keeps turning. What's not so common is for it to trickle all the way down to the entry level. Now, for that entry level product to perform almost as well and be just as durable as that more expensive stuff, that's utter heresy. Only a month after completing my own dream build, with Shimano's XT XTR drivetrain on there, they launched their new budget-minded Deore 12-speed group. So off came all of my baller parts, and on went Deore. Welcome to the long-term review of Shimano's 12-speed Deore group. So at the heart of the Shimano Deore 12-speed drivetrain is the 12-speed Cassette. It uses the same shift ramp technology found on every other Shimano 12-speed Cassette. It even runs on the same microspline driver body as every other part in the 12-speed lineup. Next, we have the Deore Derailleur. It's got stamped parts, so it's a little bit heavier, but it uses the same clutch system, and we do mean the same clutch as every other derailleur in the lineup. Moving up forward, the Deore Spider uses the same chain retention technology, again found in every other part in the Shimano 12-speed lineup. Making it all move is the Shimano Deore 12-speed shifter. Just like the SLX model, you're only going to get one shift. The double shift technology does not happen until the XT. Moving up here, we have the Deore brake. You'll notice there's no toolless adjustment for lever throw or reach. The reach adjust does exist, but it's via a small Allen wrench right here. Moving down the line, we have a 4-piston brake setup. 180 mil center lock rotors for us. These prove to be incredibly powerful. Holding the pads in is a cotter pin. More on that later. So if we remove brakes from the equation, how does the Deore drivetrain stack up to the rest of the Shimano line? Obviously, the Deore parts that I put on my bike were significantly heavier than the stuff that I took off. The key differences being in the cassette and the cranks. The same setup in SLX will cost $409, and Shimano's XT 12-speed is $623, with XTR topping things off at $1,285. So Shimano's offering the same performance technologies as their higher-end products. This drivetrain costs $297. $597 if you add in these 4-pot brakes. It's just a little bit heavier. We've got some great performance. What's the rub? The first thing I noticed was not a whole lot, actually. The big standout thing came in the form of the shift pod. The single shift and the lever throw were noticeably longer and a little bit slower than an XT pod. However, the chain landed in the same spot just as precisely every single time. These Deore brakes, they're going to send your eyeballs through your goggles. They are incredibly powerful. Time and time again, they are top performers. No wandering bite point, no complaints about the performance whatsoever. Honestly, it took a little bit of time to get used to how hard these things bit. For some reason, even nastier than the XT brakes I had pulled off. Maybe we got a super duper set, but these things are awesome. So at one point during our long-term test, we developed a bit of a creak in the rear end. Trying to isolate what the problem was, I pulled off the Deore cassette and put my XTR cassette on there, but the creak persisted. What it did give was an opportunity to see if there was any kind of noticeable shift difference between the two cassettes. And I'll say, there wasn't. As it turns out, the creak was actually in the free hub body, and that got repaired on its own. Something you're gonna notice about my test bike is that there is no chain guide on here. Now, in 7 months, and we actually went through 2 chains, we rode this thing so much, not once did this thing ever fall off. Getting into some of the rougher bits of the first ride, I couldn't help but notice a nasty rattle coming from the front of my bike. I quadruple checked all of the bolts out front, and I couldn't figure it out. I was finally able to narrow it down and figure out what it was. The brake pads. I'm not sure if it's the simple cotter pin that holds these things in, or if it's just part of #Shimano life, but these things rattled terrible. Until about the 3rd ride in. I'm not sure if they settled in or what it was, but the rattle did disappear, and in the 7 months since, hasn't come up again. Now, while I got along great with these Deore brakes, they aren't going to be for everybody. And I suppose if we had to call out something that isn't for everybody on this group, it's going to be these Deore 4-pots. They are incredibly powerful and they take a very light touch. If you're used to a lot of modulation and you're maybe a perpetual brake dragger, these things might drive you nuts. It's very easy to overbrake, so you have to be mindful. Either adapt or move on. We liked the adaptation. So if we had to call out something else, it would be that our pads are held in with this simple cotter pin. In addition to the rattling that we experienced early on, I think we'd sleep a little better at night knowing that this pin threaded through and was held in place with a safety C-clip, much like the higher end brakes found in Shimano's line. So we know the Deore group performed well on trail, but now we're going to tear it apart to see if there's any hidden gremlins hiding beneath this lovely veneer. So kind of a pet peeve with any of the Shimano 12-speed group is the fact that the cassette comes in multiple pieces. On the left, we have the XTR setup, and on the right, the Deore. Now the XTR is going to go on there, and you're going to have 4 extra cogs, plus some washers that you have to line up just so in order for your cassette to go together correctly. With the Deore, you're going to have an extra cog to deal with, as well as some washers. Same thing, everything's got to be lined up just right in order for that cassette to fit on the micro spline hub. So as we continue tearing down the bike, checking on the clutch, it's still super stiff after all those shifts. Disengage it, nice and smooth, easy for pulling the wheel off. All right, so we've got the non-drive side pulled off here. We're gonna dig in to see how the bottom bracket held up. All right, that aside. Bearings still feel good and tight. Digging into the front brake here, it's worth noting that not once since the initial setup have we had to bleed these things. The bite point was consistent the entire time, never any spongy feel at the brake lever. Okay, cotter pin. That's what the rear brake looks like. Not bad. The most disruptive component coming out of the drivetrain market is coming from the entry level. Deore is the sort of group that riders have been asking for. It's incredibly durable, it's affordable, and it allows you to move throughout the entire Shimano range. We have to tip our hat. The Deore 12-speed group is a home run. For our more in-depth review of the Shimano Deore 12-speed group, head to vitalmtb.com. If you want to see more great content like this, you know you got to smash that like and subscribe button. Until then, go ride your bike. Okay.